Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce GTX 1080 Ti, the beast from 2017, in ARK Survival Evolved, which is a UE4 title, and ARK Survival Ascended, which is UE5. This one is a Gigabyte version of the card. We are running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Ups GPU Z, and over on the left, we're pairing it with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D with half of its cores disabled, making it the same as a 7800X 3D. And yes, it's overkill, but it's just so we don't bottleneck the card. It doesn't really matter, it's a GPU benchmark, and we're using 32 gigabytes of RAM with it as well. Let's get into it, shall we? And here we are, my friends. Let's go over the settings first. This is ARK Survival Evolved, and we're playing it at 1080p resolution right now using the Epic settings, full resolution scale, so it's native 1080p, and if you set it to the Epic preset alone, it actually doesn't really max it out, as you can see. And I'm also going to disable the motion blur right here, as well as light bloom. This looks terrible in this game, okay? It looks so much better with those two things disabled. And look at that. This is actually quite a beautiful game, you know, in terms of colors and stuff. Of course, the textures aren't really that amazing by today's standards, but back when this game came out a decade ago, actually, at least in early access, of course, it was a beast of a game, you know. It was very, very hard to max it out, especially in 2014, 2015. I think it released in 2014, right? So back then we had like the GTX 980, which is much slower than the GTX 1080 Ti, of course, and that GPU is doing about half of the FPS that this one is doing. So, yeah, you couldn't really max out this game back then and get 60 frames per second, but thankfully thankfully the GTX 1080 Ti came along in 2017 to save the day, my friends, and you could actually max out ARK at 1080p resolution and get 60 plus FPS most of the time, or at least on average, okay? Now, it still drops here and there, okay? It's not a stable 60 plus FPS experience all of the time, unfortunately, but there is a lot of headroom. Of course, you could lower things down to the high settings preset, for example, and achieve those sweet 60 plus all over the time here with this GPU. So that's not bad, and it's also not stuttering too much. I remember this game to be way more stuttery than it is right now. Also, how come I'm not seeing any big dinos right now? That's pretty weird, you know? I would like to see big dinosaurs everywhere. Also, this area is usually pretty intensive. It's the swamp area. Maybe not this one. Maybe in that direction is slightly more intensive than this. But as you can see, it's starting to drop slightly from 60 frames per second. There's a big one right there, my friends. Let's kick his ass. Yeah, look at that. 58, 59 FPS. So it's not stable 60 plus all of the time. And we dropped our perfect averages of 69 FPS already, unfortunately. There we go. We got the dino there. Let's go! Can I kill this one, actually? I probably can, because they don't do damage to me, I think. That's what I said in the game world settings before I joined this. But yeah, there we go. We got this big one. Look at that. Amazing. But yeah, no problems. Oh, it's the alligator one. I hate this guy. Okay, there we go. We got him. That was really fast. I love it. Okay. Let's turn it down a little bit to the high settings, actually. There we go. So this is high settings. I'm just going to max out the resolution scale, so we are, again, at the native resolution. And look at this. We're getting 90 FPS, 80 FPS. I think this way we can get 60 plus FPS all over the time with similar graphics to Epic settings. You know, you're not really losing much coming from Epic to high, and you are gaining a ton of FPS, of course, so this is definitely the way to go. Also, if you're wondering, I've been playing this in first person, but if you go third person, you get pretty much the same FPS, as you can see. 91, 92... It's the same thing, okay? And let's go to this intensive area once again, where we were dropping from 60 frames per second. There's a little bit of a fight going on over here. Of course, they all turn to me. They're attacking each other and dying. But no, El Crespo needs to die first, no matter what. What the heck? This is so weird seeing these guys jump like this. Why did they make them jump like that? Getting 80s right now. That's quite a bit of a difference, right? Like, we're getting 20 more FPS coming from epic settings to the high settings, and this should make it so. It still stutters. Traversal stutter is still a thing here, of course. It's UE4. But yeah, since we're getting 60 plus FPS all of the time with these settings, I think it's time for us to go up to 1440p resolution. Come on, be faster, buddy. All right, enough 1080p. Let's go up to 1440p, which was a much more adequate resolution for a 1080 Ti back in the days. And apparently, I'll need to restart the game to apply the resolution because this game, all of these years later, it still doesn't work right. And here we go, guys. 2560 by 1440 high settings preset without those two things over here, and the highest resolution scale, of course, which is native. And we're getting 60s, as you can see. But this isn't really that intensive around here. If we go in this direction, yep, it starts dropping quite a bit from 60 FPS, so it's even more intensive than 1080p epic settings, looking in this direction, at least at the 1440p high settings. Although it still looks better than 1080p did, because 1440p is 78% higher resolution pixel count-wise than 1080p is. So yeah, things are way sharper like this. It looks better. Now, it's quite a bit more stuttery. I'm feeling quite a few more stuttering issues right now. Like, look at that frame time graph, right? It's pretty bad. I wouldn't really enjoy the game too much like this, honestly. Most of the time, it's below 60 frames per second, or like half of the time, it's below 60 frames per second, especially in these areas right here. And 50s coming from 1080p resolution at 60 plus. It feels a bit sluggish, not gonna lie, guys. But anyway, we need to drop it down to medium settings to make it playable, or a little bit better here at the 1440p resolution. Let's disable light bloom as well. And like this, we can get 70-something frames per second. That's way better, although we need to restart to fully apply things. Here we go. After a fresh restart, we're on medium settings and 1440p resolution, and it still looks fairly similar to high, guys. Although the LOD, especially the shadow LOD, is a lot worse right now. You can start noticing some things popping in. But hey, overall, it's still pretty enough to be enjoyable, in my opinion. And now we're getting 60 plus FPS with a lot of stuttering still because of the engine. Once again, there's nothing we can do about it, unfortunately. It seemed like it was a little bit smoother on 1080p resolution, but it's probably because we've been to that area already, and it already loaded everything that there was to load right there. You gotta live with the stuttering issues if you want to play some ARK Survival Evolved, as well as Survival Ascended, and I think Survival Ascended will be even worse, but we'll get there in just a little bit. Okay, anyway, at the 1440p medium settings, game is quite playable, as you can see. Shouldn't drop too much from 60 FPS, if at all, honestly, and you can have a great experience here, okay? Now we're in this area, very intensive one, with those roots over there, and it's not even dropping from 70 frames per second, so all good with these settings. Let's go up to 4K resolution. This is gonna get wrecked. And here we have it, 4K resolution using medium settings, and well, it's actually not as bad as I thought it would be, because it's getting 40 FPS. And I mean, you should probably avoid playing at 4K at this point with the 1080 Ti, but it wasn't an uncommon thing to do back when this game released, and when the 1080 Ti released, of course. Actually, the game released earlier. So if you wanted to play some ARK Survival Evolved, you'd be getting 30-something FPS. This game was completely broken in terms of optimization back then, and it kind of still is, even after its full release and everything. I mean, look at the frame time graph, right? It's a complete stutter mess. But yeah, it's playable at the very least. It is what it is, guys. This game's completely broken. Also, you can see the presets right here. For low settings, it recommends a GTX 660. For epic settings, it recommended the Titan X, which was the best GPU available when the game came out. It was absolutely insane. Let's do low settings now. We probably need to restart it again. Or maybe not, actually. You know what? I'm not going to restart this time because it gets pretty much the same FPS when I restart. But it's just to show you that the low settings look absolutely terrible. It does get 60 plus FPS at the very least, so if you want that experience at 4K native and you want to sacrifice everything for those sweet 60 plus FPS, well, you can still have it. It's hovering around like the low 60s in the worst case scenario, so that's okay. Stop it! But these graphics, man, this is absolutely atrocious. So I would never ever do this. I'm gonna stop it there. Let's go play some Survival Ascended next, which should run much worse. And well, here we have it, guys. ARK Survival Ascended at 1080p using the epic settings. Okay, so it's still the same settings that we started with in Survival Evolved. Resolution scale is defaulting to 90%, just like in Survival Evolved, which is weird. I'm gonna set it to 100%, so it's native resolution. And well, this is it. It doesn't seem too bad if I stand still, but if I start moving, it is a complete mess, and it's completely unplayable, guys. At least we're getting a very smooth frame time graph over there. Like, it's a flat line, just how I like it, and just how it should be in most games, you know? No stutters, but it's getting 10 FPS or 12 FPS on a 1080 Ti. That's absolutely ridiculous, right? And I mean, it does look quite good compared to the first installment of ARK. It's UE5 after all, but yeah, I don't think it should be running this poorly on this GPU. Come on, guys. They need to optimize it better, right? Look at this. I just disabled the motion blur because that was absolutely atrocious. It makes it a little bit more bearable this way. At least we can see the things properly. More like a slideshow than a slow movie, basically. You know, sometimes I'm at the movies in the cinema, you know, and they do like a pan shot of a city, for example, and I can't really see anything because of the freaking motion blur, and I'm like, come on, dude. Well, we should move on. Also, the VRAM usage is way higher. That's actually allocation. The usage should be lower, but still, it consumes a lot of VRAM. It's just a mess, guys. And they actually ask for an RTX 4070 and up to use it on epic settings. So I think we should get it down to like low right away. Okay. Also, if you guys are enjoying this video, I can test this game out in other GPUs as well. I probably will. And we will check out Bob's Tall Tales because we need to kill Bob. I don't know why they put a Bob in this game, but I don't like it already. And here we have it. This is low settings in this game. Will the textures change? Maybe they're just loading. I hope so. Yes, they're just loading. This one's already loaded. These ones are still very pixelated. Shadow. What is going on with that shadow, dude? That is so weird. Oh, what? What happened? Like, over here it's all right. Oh, it's when you look down it disappears. Okay, it still looks pretty good, aside from those textures sometimes. Yeah, on this side of the river, it actually looks pretty decent. So yeah, that's the power of UE5, my friends. Stutterfest once again, getting 30 FPS, sometimes dropping from 30 FPS. 1080 Ti is just not capable for this particular title, unfortunately. Now, there are some things that you can adjust in the console. For example, you can remove this fog, which will make it a lot more playable, and I will do that in just a little bit. But yeah, if you just keep the default settings, as you can see, it will drop a lot from 30 FPS and very often as well. But seriously, why did they make it so intensive, guys? They should have had a low settings preset like in Survival Evolved. You know, the reason why a lot of people played that game is that it runs on a potato if you keep it on low settings. And there's also a DirectX 10 mode for Survival Evolved that runs on a literal potato, the GT710, okay, with 30 plus FPS in the X10 720p lowest settings, probably with some resolution scaling as well. But yeah, this one, it doesn't have that, and even on the low settings in the X12 it looks very good, right? There is a lot more variety as well in the vegetation and stuff. I like that. I like to see that, but again, a 1080 Ti getting these FPS is absolutely ridiculous. Remember, this GPU is close in performance to an RTX 3060. And although it will run better on a 3060 because it's UE5 and it takes better advantage of newer architectures, it shouldn't be running like this once again. And I guess we should try it with some FSR because it has that. And how do I select the FSR setting? I actually don't know. This is so weird. Like, this game. Dude, the last time that I tested it was like a year ago. Maybe not that long, but several months ago. And they still are broken. Like, what the hell is this? I select FSR, nothing happens. I'm gonna set it to the absolute lowest settings now. All right, I'm gonna go one by one because some things are still on high, like the foliage quality, the global illumination, which should be very intensive, as well as the shadows. For some reason, on the low preset, they're still on high, right? And let's go back to the main menu, restart. Here we go. Still looks pretty good, although we definitely lost a lot on the lighting quality, the shadow quality. Yeah, it's super noticeable, but at least it's now getting 30 plus FPS consistently. Maybe not. Yep, it still dips down into the 20s on the absolute lowest settings. Without going into config files and stuff like that and console commands, which we will do again in just a little bit. But yeah, it's rough, guys. 20s. I thought the global illumination would increase our FPS like crazy, but no, this game must be utilizing like nanite or lumen, and that's why it's so intensive, especially on the 1080 Ti, which is an older architecture once again. I thought by now maybe it was optimized slightly, you know? I guess it doesn't stutter as much as it did previously, so that's a little bit of a win there, right? Like, it's been fairly smooth, smoother than ARK Survival Evolved, in my opinion. So there's that. I guess they compiled the shaders a little bit better in this new version of the game, or newer version of the game, but it's still not enough to make GPUs like the 1080 Ti playable in Survival Ascended. Look at this, still dropping into the 20s, looking down at the water and stuff. Yeah, okay, let's do the console commands as a last resort. Also, I'm just noticing, if you take a look at the power usage of this GPU in this particular title, it's fluctuating a lot, right? It goes up to the 250 watts, which it should run at, because it's a 250 watt TDP GPU, but then it goes down to like 200-ish, 193 right there, 189. For what reason? Why is that happening? And it's getting exactly the same FPS when it happens, though. So it doesn't really matter, but it's really weird. Okay, the first console command that we're going to try is r.lumen.reflections.allow 0. And this will disable the lumen reflections, which should improve the FPS a lot with the 1080 Ti. Let's click enter here. And, well, it gave us 1 FPS. Oh my god, seriously, this is not a good start. Okay, all right, let's try r.lumen.diffuseindirect.allow 0. And this one bumped up our FPS to 30. Okay, it gave us 3 FPS. So it's a little bit better, but it's starting to look a bit worse, right? I mean, I can tell a little bit of a difference in the vibrancy of colors and the depth of it and like the shadows and so on. And this one is r.water.single-layer-reflection 0. Let's check it out. It definitely changed the water a lot, but we're still at 30 FPS, so it didn't really do much for our frames. I'll still keep it, okay? I want to lower the graphics down enough to a point where I feel like it would be low settings, you know? Let's try to get rid of the volumetric clouds next with r.volumetric cloud 0. And we gained a couple of more FPS. Everything got cleared up a lot as well. Like, there's still fog by the right of the screen. I'm not moving the mouse, so we have a little bit of a comparison in FPS. But you can see that the fog is still there on the right of the screen, but there's no clouds on the sky, and the visibility improved a lot as well at the distance. So this is actually decent, even if you are playing on a high-end system, because it just improves visibility, right? Next, let's disable the fog, okay, with our volumetric fog 0. And this doesn't really improve our FPS by much. As you can see, it got exactly the same 33 FPS, but we disabled that fog, and everything is much more contrasty now, which some people might prefer. Oh, no, do not do this. Okay, thank you. Seriously, you're messing up my benchmark. Stop. Anyway, we're still getting those 33 frames per second. We sacrificed a lot of the visual quality compared to low settings preset, right? But it's now starting to look like low settings. It's the difference from dropping from 30 frames and keeping those 30 steady all of the time. And well, that's about it for the tweaks. Let's see if it can stay above 30 FPS now. It's stuttering quite a lot once again. Up into the 40s this time. But it's starting to look really terrible though. Like, I would just completely avoid this game on a 1080 Ti if I'm honest. Like, go play Survival Evolved if you're really into ARK. I think Survival Ascended is way too intensive for this card, unfortunately, because they aren't optimizing it, of course. We can make it playable in terms of frame rates. It gets 30 plus like this. But it is not a good experience visually speaking. It lacks a lot of detail, and everything kind of looks blue, you know. It's really weird. Visibility might be a bit better at the distance than it was before, but you're changing the graphics so much that it's not worth playing like this. It just looks like crap. like what is this water, right? It's just a black blob over here. Oh my gosh. All right, guys. Well, that's been it for this one. There could still be one thing that we can do, like set the resolution scale to 69%. But again, I'm not sure if it will work. Now, it is working. All right, it is working at 69% resolution scale. It definitely made it a bit smoother. But yeah, with 69% resolution scale, it doesn't even drop into the 30s anymore. Gets 40 plus all of the time, I guess. Even in third person, if you're wondering. Ooh, no, it does drop down to 37 there. It's just because of this area, okay? It's not because of third person. But yeah, guys, that's it. You can get it to get playable FPS, right? But it is absolutely atrocious of an experience. FPS are still low and it looks like shite, basically. I'll catch you in the next one. As always, love you all. Bye-bye.